welcome to the Appointment on Election Exchange. I'm Shereen Bhan, and we're in conversation with Mr. Arun Shourie, a man who's rumored to be one of the contenders for North Block. Mr. Shourie, I know you're nodding at me. I know that you have no information. You have not been sounded out. You haven't been reached out to so far. But this is the buzz and this is the speculation at this point in time. So let me ask you, if that call were to come to you, would you be open and up for the job?
You see, the point is, एक ख्वाबी पुलाव बनाओ और फिर कहो कि हम खाएंगे या नहीं खाएंगे, पहले वो बना ही नहीं है.
अगर बन गया तो
नहीं please, but there is no occasion to, I think that would be quite.
But you're open to being back in government.
No, but madam, I would not want to answer that question at all.
Okay, let me not put you in that awkward position, but let me ask you, sir, about the state of the economy. And the reason I ask you this is because there's been a lot of criticism, and you have criticized the government's budget. You've said that there's been a gross underestimation as far as expenditure is concerned, as far as subsidies are concerned, and an overestimation as far as tax revenues and revenue mobilization is concerned. Given that context, how easy is it going to be for the new government to try and kickstart the engines of growth, to try and correct what you see as being the fiscal mess?
Yes, I think the fiscal situation is very difficult, and it will require a very strong hand of the government to be able to deal with it. We are in a situation in which the net borrowings of the government by next year may not be sufficient even to pay the interest on government debt which has already been contracted.
Yeah.
And the amounts of payments on the principal payment also, repayment will be 3 times every year, the average for the next 5 years than it has been in the last 5 years.
So you believe we're headed into a debt trap?
We could be, unless very firm steps are taken now, both on the resources side and on the expenditure side. The expenditure side, the ability to compress is much less than people assume. After all, in the last, Shereen, in the last 2 years, the planned expenditure was cut first by 1,08,000 crores. This year by about 85,000 crores. Is this the way to have growth for the future? And non-planned expenditure today, 80-90% is really something.
Subsidies, salaries, so on and so forth.
Salaries, pensions, and defense.
So you're saying there is essentially no room for further expenditure cuts, no room to further squeeze expenditure today?
Except by doing something about subsidies, for instance, diesel prices, and secondly, by a more efficient targeting of subsidies. Various estimates, Ashok Gulati has said, others have said that you can save up to 40% on subsidy expenditures by direct targeting. So
let me address the subsidy issue before we get into anything else, sir. You talked about diesel prices. The former government decided to raise diesel prices by 50 paise a month. Do you believe the time has now come to up that? Do you believe that we should at this point in time be doing at least a rupee till we deregulate diesel prices altogether? Do you believe that is the way forward?
Well, actually, it's inevitable in the sense that they budgeted for 50 paise per month.
Right.
Okay, 4 months would have gone even before the new government starts. So you've already lost 1 quarter for that 50 paise increase. Now you would have to increase it by much more. And that will have an effect on retail prices. Therefore, you will have to take countermeasures. Everybody suggests offload 20-30 million tons of food grains over the next year, free perishables like fruits and vegetables from the APMC Act, and other things. Again, Ashok Gulati and others have argued that it is not that you've just been going on increasing minimum support prices, but over these you have had commissions and bonuses in Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh. In Punjab there are taxes, and that is what has led to the to driving out many participants in food grain trade, and thereby stocks have accumulated. And you are not able to use, I don't know why they are not using the stocks to deal with inflation.
So do you believe that on sensitive and controversial, politically controversial issues like diesel price hikes, because of the political mandate and the fact that you actually have no coalition compulsions to deal with, the Modi-led government will be able to go forward with a more aggressive diesel price hike?
I think they have the opportunity, but whether they'll do it or not, only they will know.
As far as expenditure is concerned, and we've talked about the flagship schemes for the UPA, NREGS for instance, as part of in the run-up to the election campaign, Mr. Modi talked about linking that to asset creation. The food security bill, in the BJP's manifesto, you've talked about consulting with state governments to review the Food Security Act itself. What can we expect since you're talking about better efficiency, better targeting, as well as pruning expenditure, what can we expect as far as some of these UPA flagship entitlement-based schemes are concerned?
I can't speak on behalf of the government or on behalf of Mr. Modi, but I think that the circumstances will compel the new government, for instance, better use of Narega for capital creation. Even Mr. N.C. Saxena in the NAC had written at the very commencement of this that it should not be extended to districts which have labor shortage. But Mr. Rahul Gandhi said, all districts, and he claimed great credit for it. It was Dr. Manmohan Singh caved in and extended to all districts. What is the point? You are de-skilling, you are demotivating people from work.
But it is today now right. So what can we expect as far as some of these schemes are concerned?
Well, I think therefore Mr. Modi's general attitude is the next generation of the subsidy, better targeted, better used for asset creation.
Okay.
Better executed, for instance, in housing schemes, better execution.
Let me talk to you about the fiscal deficit. And do you believe that you are going to be able to achieve that number that was set out by the former finance minister, 4.1%? Because you don't even think that 4.6% is a credible number. You believe the fiscal deficit as it stands today is closer to 5%.
Yes.
So do you believe that you will be able to achieve that 4.1% number, or do you think that it makes more sense to not obsess with this number, to lay out a very clear roadmap as far as fiscal consolidation is concerned, but if need be, say we need to take corrective measures, we won't be able to achieve this number this time around, but here's our roadmap for fiscal consolidation.
That's right. That's right. This government can start by rebuilding the credibility of the word of the government of India, by not having artificial figures, or figures, you take expenditure from this year, put it in next year as it happened, or take a revenue, take it and get it budgeted in this particular year. That is not going to help. And therefore, please do not believe in do not put your faith in cleverness of these, very smart people. You must actually do things on the ground, as they say, change facts on the ground. And for that, there are things that you can do even on the resources side. These residual stake sales, Balco, Hindustan Zinc, is it, better than I do, in Axis Bank the government has some share?
Yes. Why? Well, they have actually sold some of their stakes.
But why more? Why not more?
Yeah.
Similarly, why are you there?
It's ironical you bring up Hindustan Zinc and Balco, because the original divestment was done under the NDA's tenure when you were the disinvestment minister. You have then been questioned by the CBI because of a preliminary inquiry that was registered in that matter. Do you believe that finally we could perhaps see the residual stakes?
No, but it is very interesting. Balco mein to inquiry nahi hui, but in the case of Hindustan Zinc, each time the proposal for putting a note to the Manmohan Singh cabinet for this residual sale was to come up, somebody will start putting stories in the papers about the great loss that the country was inflicted by this disinvestment. That the fact that their profits have gone up by 1,000%, that their sales are 4 or 5 times higher, that production is 4 times higher, that never got the play it should. That was the purpose. And these inspectors told me, "Sab zinc to defense equipment mein use hoti hai, aur to defense equipment mein use hoti hai, to agar wo 4 guna produce ho rahi hai, is it good or bad?" Nahi sahab, ye to point hai. Phir inquiry shuru kar di to extract money from this Anil Agarwal.
So do you believe the residual stake sale will go through?
Well, I don't know if they will, but they certainly should.
Non-tax revenue resource mobilization is going to be high on the agenda?
I don't know.
Or likely to be, or will be forced to be high on the agenda?
I think that it should be. It certainly should be, because these are, this is how China has grown. By monetizing land, by monetizing other assets. The same thing as I was mentioning earlier about this idea of setting up a holding company like Temasek. Raghav Bell has worked on this matter, that with the existing companies, you can
unlock value.
Yeah, well, you can, you take 200 public sector enterprises, their assets would today be $300 to $400 billion. You put them under a holding company or 3 holding companies. These are managed by professionals. They have 2 tasks. One is to professionalize the management of each of the PSUs under them, and second is to raise money. And he had a very good point. Raise debt when interest rates are low. Last year, if this holding company had been there, as he rightly said, you could raise money at you could have raised money at 1%. Similarly, when the equity markets are good, your valuations are good, you bring in equity. That does not change the government's hold on the companies, but it professionalizes, because this holding company should consist of professional managers.
You would...
So on that, you would immediately downsize the government, because all PSUs would be taken out of the ministries. You would be able to professionalize these, and you would have raised money, in his estimate, Raghav's estimate, from $500 billion to $1 trillion in the next 5 years. Finance your entire infrastructure by that.
So in your experience and where we are today, do you believe that this is the preferred option and the preferred route, as opposed to the plain vanilla disinvestment that we saw during the NDA?
I think Mr. Modi, from remarks of on various fora that I've heard, he's not much for disinvestment of that kind. But this holding company idea is an innovative idea that several persons, including Nayak for financial...
for public sector banks. You preempted my question. Do you believe that what Mr. Nayak has suggested as far as bank recapitalization is concerned, and the process that he suggested, will perhaps be something that the government may want to consider?
That's a very good idea. I think even Mr. Y.V. Reddy and Bimal and others would be very enthusiastic about, supporters of this idea. I don't know the rest of the report about how directors should be appointed and so on. I've not studied that in detail. But this is a very good idea, because, as you have seen, today even the State Bank of India was not able to raise money in, it was quite unsuccessful in February.
And the capital requirements for the sector are huge.
Yes, Uday Kotak says they are more than 4 lakh crores. And where is the government going to get 4 lakh crores? And you have these Basel III norms coming up, and then RBI's so everything requires 80,000 crores, 2.5 lakh crores. NPAs have to be met. So you have to, I think circumstances will force the government to rational decisions. Apart from the fact that Mr. Modi seems to be very astute and has a business sense and would respond to these suggestions.
Buzz today is that, given Mr. Modi's maxim of minimum government and maximum governance, we are actually going to move away from these super-sized jumbo cabinets to a smaller, perhaps more efficient government. Do you believe that we are going to move in that direction as early as the 26th of May?
Well, I heard words to that effect, but I'm not privy to that.
But do you think that as part of the first 30, 60-day agenda, Mr. Modi is going to make it very clear that whether it's creating an integrated energy ministry, which clubs oil and gas, power and so on and so forth under one ministry, or creating an infrastructure ministry, for instance, that is going to be the road ahead. So the cabinet rank ministers are going to be a much smaller council of ministers, and a lot of ministers of state looking after these ministries or these separate functions.
Yes, that's the idea that I heard. Of course, you must remember that this works more for coordination rather than for saving a lot of money. All you've done is eliminate 20 cabinet ministers.
Sure, and so but it's about faster decision making. It's about not getting stuck.
It's a very important signal. But the moving out of 200 enterprises from the ministries will really be downsizing, and it will really be a great step towards professionalization of the governmental sector taken as a whole.
What does your gut tell you? Is he going to bite this bullet right away?
And I would think so. Not on the question of moving the PSUs out, but
on downsizing the government.
I would think so.
Okay. Let me talk to you about some of the other priorities that the government faces. And we've been talking about taxes, the direct taxes code, gone through many iterations, many changes. You believe that it's essentially paragraphs moved around, clauses changed. Yes. It needs a complete overhaul again.
And not by 5 years. 3 months, get very good tax lawyers and the government's experts. Please do it. And give them very strict terms. This is what I want to see in the result. Why are you going on and on with these exemptions? That's where all the problem arises. And the complexity of the code arises. And the American Constitution is 14 articles. So we should do something like that. But
what would be a realistic timeline then for the DTC, given the routes that you're suggesting?
I can write a 400-page book in 3 months from beginning to end. So if I can, sitting alone, do it with all the references and all the footnotes.
So maybe not in this session of Parliament, but in the next session of Parliament, you believe the government should be ready to bring it to Parliament?
But it is certainly possible. That does not mean you've got the consensus of everybody. As Mrs. Thatcher would say, it's an overrated virtue, this consensus. Get the best experts. Here are chapter-wise things. Please just simplify.
Vodafone has now slapped the government with an arbitration notice. Yes. They tried to conciliate with the Indian government. The Indian government wanted them to conciliate under Indian law. Vodafone said we can't do it under Indian law. What is the best way forward?
Yeah. The best forward is what was there in the contract? In the first license, was there a provision for arbitration and where? That's the point. If it's there, then it's the word of the government of India that is at stake, not some 1,000 crores. So if you agreed at the time of the contract or the bid or the license to a particular clause, you must adhere to that clause. So if it said, yes, it will be examined, the arbitration shall take place in London, it must take place in London. I can't understand this great going back on the word of the government now.
But without getting into a specific instance of addressing the Vodafone issue, do you believe that the government will have to move forward as far as amending the retrospective tax law is concerned? Because then it will be accused of dealing with one company in one way, another company another way, because there's a laundry list of companies that are facing exactly the same problem.
But therefore, you must have credible persons at all levels whose word will not be doubted. They are not favoring this company or that company. They are going by a general announcement which will always favor some and hurt others. Any measure that you take, if you today offload food grains in the market, it will certainly hurt the trader. Therefore, are you hurting it? Is that why you did it? You are helping the consumer also. You take a policy decision that applies across the board. And that can be done by a person. I think Modi's thing would not be questioned. But he must have other persons in whoever take these decisions, whom nobody can think that yes, they would. Kya India mein aisa akal ho gaya hai that we cannot find 10 such persons whose word will not be doubted. I can't understand.
You know, speaking of creating the right investment climate, interest rates, and we would like to see interest rates come down, but given where inflation is, the Reserve Bank says, if you don't have room to cut expenditure any further, I don't have room to bring down interest rates any further. Yes. What can be done at this point in time to make space for the Reserve Bank of India, given the fact that you find yourself in a fiscal hole?
Yes, therefore do something first in the fiscal hole. Please don't keep accusing the Reserve Bank. Far from...
Even within your party, they're accusing the Reserve Bank.
So, but I can only speak for myself. The reason is exactly as you said, that because of fiscal profligacy, interest rates have had to... There's been inflation, and interest rate is, in my view, too blunt an instrument to deal with inflation. Inflation is food and vegetables. Right. Interest rates are, I've used the analogy of trying to squat a mosquito with an axe. But that's the position. He has no alternative but to use all instruments of monetary policy for dealing with inflation. We want, and it is true that is hurting industry, hurting investment, so we must ease that. But that can only be done once we have a credible program and convince the Reserve Bank we have a credible program which we will follow in regard to fiscal containment.
So while you will follow a credible roadmap for fiscal consolidation, let me once again ask you, is that 4.1% fiscal deficit number sacrosanct to your mind?
But I don't know how that number has been arrived at. And I would therefore really, I don't think anybody would be deterred by the number as long as your program is clear. Even if you don't
So even if there was slippage, because this is something that rating agencies, the markets are going to be watching very closely.
So therefore do not please put a number there which you don't think you can achieve. But it will only be after studying the figures that anybody can say what would be a reasonable number. But once the government gives its...
And you don't believe 4.1 is a reasonable number today, where things stand today?
At the moment I don't think so. Because of the way expenditures have been postponed, revenues have been taken forward, I don't think that's going to be possible. You'll have to, otherwise you'll have to exert very hard on raising resources in other ways.
So how soon do you believe realistically, given all the measures that we've just talked about today, realistically can the investment cycle be turned around?
There are 3 months.
In 3 months?
Yes, and irrespective of interest rates. Just by clearances, by announcements on retrospective taxation, by reining in this waived income tax officers and so on. Yes, in 3 months you can change the climate.
But it also means that they will have to make definitive statements and articulate very clearly their intent on all of the issues that we spoke about in the first 3 months.
And the best occasion for that is the budget, which you have to present in 6 to 8 weeks. That's the best occasion on which you make firm statements, lay down a clear roadmap, and because Parliament has passed it, you will have the sanctity and authority to say, I'm going to stick with that, but you have to then make sure that no other ministry and nobody demands it. Therefore, it's only the authority of the Prime Minister that can deliver.
I don't know whether you're going to be presenting the budget or not, Mr. Shourie, but let me end by asking you, what to your mind will be the 3 priorities that the budget will be defined by, that the first budget of the Narendra Modi government will be defined by?
The roadmap for reforms,
FDI, subsidy curtailment, all of that.
All of that, including reining in income tax department, what you are going to do on the details, everything that you have mentioned.
Okay.
Second, second would be that on fiscal consolidation, these are the steps which we are going to take, and here is a realistic estimate of the resources I will raise outside this tax and expenditure bind. That would be a very important thing to be able to say. Third, I think you are right that a separate thing must be said in the question of reforms on the financial sector, including this whole business of the regulatory framework. One of the things that has happened now in India is that with 36 regulators in the economy, with 9 in the financial sector, 13 in the education sector, these are the numbers. You are just not able to know which is the maze.
So the recommendations of the FSLRC, you believe that
yes,
has merit?
Yes, but I do not know the specific recommendations, but certainly we must review them.
Move towards unified regulators as well, not just a smaller government, but also unified regulators.
And not just another level, which will be another, that will be the 37th regulator.
Mr. Shourie, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. We will know on the 26th where you are going to be, but thank you very much for joining us and giving us your prescription for how to pull the Indian economy back to the 8-9% growth rate. And you're confident of being able to turn the investment climate around in the next 3 months. You believe the government can do it, so let's hope that that indeed is the case. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.